Today, we're looking at a serious case that highlights the importance of parental responsibility. Jennifer Crumbly, mother of the Oxford High School shooter, has recently been found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. This case raises critical questions about parents' accountability for their children's actions. To help us navigate through this complex issue, we have a local legal expert joining us, bringing insights that might resonate with every parent out there. We're speaking with the personal injury law firm of Ashton and Price, who is recognized as one of Sacramento County's most prominent personal injury law firms. We have Craig Fontaine Ashton of Ashton and Price. Hey, Craig.
Morning.
Good morning. Okay, so Craig, we know that you're not directly connected to this case, but can you break down for our viewers what vicarious criminal liability means in the context of parents and their children's actions?
Right. So essentially what it means is imputing the actions of somebody else onto you. So we have it with permissive user statutes in California, where if somebody drives your car because you're the owner, even though you're not driving, you can bear responsibility. We have something called respondeat superior, which means if your employee hurt somebody, then you can have vicarious liability through that. And now this is the first time in the history of the United States that significant criminal liability is attached to a parent in a mass shooting.
Okay, so can you talk about the verdict in Jennifer Crumbly's case? How might this impact future cases involving parents and their children's access to weapons?
Right, so what they basically says, look, if you allow a minor to have access to a weapon, in other words, you don't properly secure it, and you are aware of either words or behavior that is threatening, then at that point, there's a duty on you. And so in this case, the interesting thing was that they bought a gun specifically for their child who was on Facebook talking about their, felt like they wanted to harm themselves or harm others. They'd written things in their math books to show the counselors that perhaps this person was thinking about some sort of violent behavior. And they, even though they had guns secured, they didn't tell the counselors when they met with them the day of the shooting at the school with their son that they bought him a gun 4 days before. And knowing this information and not passing that information on in that really short period of time, the jury said, look, you parents bear responsibility for the actions of your child because you allowed him access to a gun and you were aware of threatening words or behavior. And therefore, she's facing 60 years in prison as a result of this.
And looking at the evidence in this case, how significant is it for parents to act upon explicit threats or disturbing behavior displayed by their children? Like you were mentioning, maybe there were some signs early on.
Right. So, I mean, there's obviously, we have medical privacy, right? So, I mean, you want to protect the privacy to make sure people are forthcoming, especially with your children, to tell you what they're feeling. But you also have to use reasonable care to protect us. So if you have a gun at home, it has got to be secure. That is a non-negotiable duty. And then if you are aware of behavior that ultimately is threatening and you're not sure about the access to their gun, you need to let people know. And that's what this law says. We haven't applied it in California yet, but this is a precedent, first time in the history of mass shooting that significant liability criminally is attached to a parent.
To that point, are there any legal parallels in California that might shed light on how similar cases could be approached in our state specifically?
Right, there is. So if you, right now, there's civil liability for the parent if the children acts intentionally, which means not criminal liability, you're not going to jail, but you would have to pay up to $25,000 if your child acts intentionally and harms somebody. So we already have that. We have permissive user statutes. If you own a car and you let somebody else drive it, even though you're not responsible for the accident and they hurt somebody, then you're responsible up to $15,000. So we have basically vicarious imputed liability based upon some sort of either contractual relationship or familial relationship. And so they could apply the same thing in California in terms of criminal liability like they did in Michigan.
Yeah. What can parents learn from this case to ensure the safety and well-being of children and the community at large?
Yeah, just use reasonable care. I mean, if you've got a son or a daughter or a child that ultimately has issues with mental health and they're threatening themselves or others and they have access to a gun, you've got to be aware of that because ultimately it can harm a lot of people. Like in this case, 4 people died. And then it can also harm you and your family. So very important to use reasonable care and stay on top of that.
Given the rise of school-related incidents, what role do you think schools and communities should play in identifying and addressing potential threats from students?
Yeah, we've seen it over and over and over again. This happens. I mean, I was born in South Africa. I travel a lot. They basically banned assault weapons in Australia. This has not happened since then. We have a different Second Amendment approach. So if you see a problem with somebody that you know, either a family member or a friend, and they have access to weapons, you've got to step forward, use reasonable care, be careful, it'll protect you, your family, your friends, and and your society.
Yeah. Any final tips for parents on navigating that fine line between respecting and ensuring their children's actions don't lead to harmful consequences?
That's a hard one, and that's what we're battling all the time, because you want to be respectful of your children's privacy, but you also have to use reasonable care, and it's a tough one, and that's what we're kind of battling right now. This legal liability may make people a little bit more active in paying attention, because now it's not only the son or the daughter that's going to be responsible, but there could be criminal liability on the parent, and usually that makes people a little bit more aware.
Yeah. Craig Fontaine Ashton with Ashton and Price, thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you.
All right, I'm going to let our viewers know where they can go for more information. You can find out more by going to ashtonandprice.com.